my trampoline workout thing. Okay, there's my.
Jen,
You guys,
about 80% of the time, I have no idea what you're talking about.
yeah.
Is
me
that because
too.
I've gotten old, or is it because you've gotten old?
It's because the concentric circles of our lives don't
Uh,
overlap
They
outside of the
really
beer
don't.
industry.
That's
Not
true.
at all. To take it away?
Hold on, Jen. I know that you're eager to get started here because this is a first time. Brian, have you been on this podcast before?
I don't think so.
You're in for a real treat, buddy.
This is a great honor. Thank you, guys.
It's more than that. This is the podcast that all your dreams come true, is what we say.
Wow.
And we mean it. A lot of dreams have come true. I would say that, like, we've created a few not created, but we've put a few brands on the map by appearing on this podcast. I want to say, like, I would say Beatbox, Loverboy, Happy Dad, Pop Water, all benefited in their early days. Because the reason why is because this podcast is listened to by not everybody in the industry, but the most important people in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Jen, why don't you introduce our guest properly and we'll get started.
Absolutely. I'm still waiting for my dreams to come true, but that's okay. I'm young. So anyway, I'd like to welcome to BeerNet Radio, Brian Crawford, Chief of the Beer Institute. And of course, you guys are coming up on your annual meeting, November 4th, which is Election Day in the Big Apple. And so we just want to hear about what's going to go down this year, some of behind the scenes. And are you guys going to blend receptions with watch parties, or like, how's that going to work on Election Day? I'm very curious.
Well, we're gonna make it. We're gonna make dreams happen, as Harry said. No, the big reception is Monday night, and
Okay.
then the annual meeting programming is actually Election Day. But we're gonna wrap up a little early. We're gonna truncate the program so that folks can hop on flights or get on trains and get home, or get to a location to watch returns come in. But I feel like after this election season, we're all going to deserve a beer. And so it's good for us to be together. And, nothing brings people together better than beer, right? It's a nonpartisan product. So yeah, it's tough to find a date that works for our voting board. And this happened to be one. And so we've been sending messages out and urging our members and everyone to vote absentee, vote by mail, do whatever they need to do to do their civic duty, because this election really matters.
Or just don't vote at all, because there's just not a lot of good options, I find. But that's neither here nor there. I mean, one thing I can totally get on board with you, Brian, is that we will deserve a beer, probably more than that, probably several beers. And I think everybody will just be glad that it's over one way or another. No matter which way it goes, it's just over.
Yeah. Oh.
And I can go back on Twitter and see something besides election news.
Yeah, it's brutal. It's brutal. And I spent 10 years working on Capitol Hill. I was chief of staff for two different members. I ran their campaigns. I don't miss it at all. I feel for these campaign staffers and the candidates that are just, sleepless nights and a lot of stress. But I live in Maryland, which is a very Democratic state. We are still getting bombarded with ads. There's a big Senate race in Maryland, and I'm sure it's the same for you all in Texas and elsewhere. So we're ready for it to be over.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, what's the turnout like this year? I mean, has it being on Election Day been good for turnout?
Yeah, we're excited. We're expecting just over 100 people, which is pretty much the average for our meeting. We don't have a huge trade show or anything like that. So our annual meeting is really policy focused. At the BI, we only do four things, right? We do advocacy, we do public affairs, we do research, and we celebrate beer. And so that's what we're going to be doing during our annual meeting. So it's short, quick, but impactful.
Yeah. And so, go ahead.
I was going to ask, how many new members do y'all have? Because I know I've been looking at your emails, and there's a lot of craft brewers that you've brought on. So, how many new crafts or new mid-size breweries?
Yeah, Jordan, we've made that a point of emphasis, and our goal is really to get the top 50 brewers all into membership because we view the BI as the voice for beer. Obviously, the Brewers Association does an exceptional job for craft brewers, but we want to be speaking with one voice, and we can't do so without those voices in the room. So we're going to have a lot of new attendees this year, a lot of new members that have just joined. We were just up visiting with Allagash last month. They joined the BI. They'll be there, and a lot of new supplier members. So there's a lot of momentum behind the BI. The work that we're doing, driving alignment amongst the beer industry, and making sure that we're speaking with one voice, which we hadn't been doing in the past. I felt like beer had maybe been looking to inwardly. But we've got a great working relationship with the Brewers Association and the NBWA right now. And I know we're going to talk dietary guidelines in an odd happenstance. We are working with all of our brethren in beverage alcohol right now as well. So
Listen, as somebody who's been doing this for 30 years, that doesn't happen often. There's the stars and the moons and Saturn and retrograde don't always line up. And so you're right. It's good. Let's let everybody get to know each other and everybody work together. I will say, and I've probably said this before, but to me, the BI meeting is the best meeting of the year for one simple reason. It's the only place we can go and really interact with the top brewers in the country and, the top distributors and the top people just in general. When I first got started, getting to the BI meeting was a big deal because back then it was exclusive. Like it was really hard I was banned from going for many years. And it was just because August Bush didn't like me. But then once Norman Adamy got in charge, he extended the invitation. I've been going ever since. And I met Steven Tyler in an elevator once. He had a little dog, and but that's, we're not here to talk about my old war stories. But it is a great meeting. So why don't we talk about some of the issues that will be bannered around there?
Yeah, well, Harry, we're going to be in New York, so I have faith that you're going to meet another celebrity this upcoming BI meeting.
That's my main reason for going. You know me, I love old rock stars in an elevator. He's
right,
tiny, by the way. You always think he looks big on stage, but I thought he was an old woman because he was holding a little dog. But then when I got a good look at him, I was like, oh, that's Steven Tyler.
Is that where the song came from?
I was just gonna say, dude looks like a lady.
Love in an elevator, yeah.
Love in an elevator.
I was thinking dude looks like a lady, but okay, yeah. Little guy, big voice.
That's good, Jen.
So, all right. So you talked about dietary guidelines, fighting the anti-alcohol agenda, also talking tariffs, D9, like what is all on the plate?
All of the above, Jen, and probably a little bit more, some surprises. We're hoping to roll out a couple of new initiatives for 2025, but certainly dietary guidelines is the focus right now, and the never-ending assault on our industry, which is challenging. And I've been trying to advise our members that, we need to be comfortable being uncomfortable right now because there is an agenda, there is bias, and there are anti-alcohol zealots that have made their way into our federal government that are trying to drive the process around dietary guidelines. And while the US dietary guidelines are hugely important, their aim is much broader. It is at the World Health Organization and trying to drive this notion of no safe level. So we're going to dig into that, some of the work that we've been doing and how our members can help. We'll talk about the timeline around the dietary guidelines, which, we're seeing these articles, and obviously the New York Times is leading the way and really driving this message. But there's still a long way to go. The two main entities that are doing the scientific review, one is NASEM, which is the National Academy of Sciences, which was funded and authorized by Congress. The other one is this ICPUD scientific review, which is the Interagency Coordination Committee to Prevent Underage Drinking. That is not authorized by Congress. It is questionable whether or not they have the authority to do so. Those two scientific reports are expected in December, after the election, after our annual meeting. So we're going to have a new administration one way or the other. We're going to see a lot of folks come and go from HHS, USDA, all sorts of changes. And then the actual dietary guidelines will be reviewed and written by HHS and USDA and won't be released until the end of next year, probably Q3 or Q4 of 2025. So there's a long way to go, and there's a lot of fluidity in what's going on there. And so we'll dive into that. We'll certainly talk differentiation and some of our work there, mostly on the state and local level, but there's still some federal initiatives. Tax reform is going to be a big issue for 2025. There is trillions of dollars of tax cuts that were issued under the Trump administration that are going to expire next year. And so I think all of beverage alcohol is keeping an eye on the Craft Beverage Modernization Act, and whether or not that could be a target. And so we need to be eyes wide open on that. We talked a little bit about D9 and hemp, and you guys saw our statement there. We're certainly going to address that and the broader sort of intoxicating THC products. There's confusion in the market. There's opportunity for some people, but there's confusion, right? Because hemp has been made legal under the Farm Bill. It was designed for industrial hemp, not intoxicating hemp products. But nevertheless, there's a burgeoning market there, and there's no regulation whatsoever. So it's the Wild West, and states are trying to address it. And we've seen states and governors take action. And we're working towards principles so that the beer industry can have a point of view in that debate, because we have years and years and years of practice of having a product that is highly regulated at the federal and state level, that produces revenue for the United States government, that is highly regulated, that provides responsibility for around marketing, around ABV, around nutritional information. And there's a lack of research as it relates to D9 and hemp products. And so when we think about our members, whether they're the largest brewers or the smallest brewers, they are competing every single day for consumers, but they're doing so on a level playing field. And now we have a new entrant into the market that wants to be considered like us, but they don't have to abide by the same set of rules. And so that's the challenge that we face. And Congress, they can't walk and chew gum at the same time. And so the notion that they're actually going to be able to fix this through a farm bill, which they're most likely going to punt on, it expires at the end of this month. I'm dubious about that. And so, and then separately on cannabis, whether or not they can, move forward with a federal legalization, I'm skeptical of that as well. So we'll dig into that. We'll talk category health and growth. We'll talk a little bit about the Cheers Act, which is designed to support our retail partners in the restaurants and bars and tap rooms to provide them a tax credit to help their business grow and offset some of their costs. And we'll talk a little politics and what it means for the industry. So we have a big agenda.
Yeah. Well, speaking of politics and what it means for the industry, right? I mean, I don't think it's a stretch to say some of your members might want Trump because of tax reasons, right? Are there any other candidate-specific things that you're hearing from your membership? They're scared, or maybe on the other way, they're scared of tariffs or, what have you. I mean, what are you hearing from your membership? Which way they're leaning, what they want, what they're concerned about?
Yeah, we're going to dive into that. We're going to talk tariffs. I mean, I think just this week, Trump called tariffs the greatest thing ever invented, that's saying a lot when you think about all the things that have been invented.
I mean, the wheel,
Ice
fire,
cream,
ice
beer.
cream.
So we can debate that, but the notion that tariffs are going to create a manufacturing boom, lower grocery costs, cut the deficit, stop wars, pay for, child care, that seems like a stretch. Now, both candidates are talking tariffs, in part because neither can be seen as being weak on China. But, you know, both administrations have addressed those through 301s and 232 tariffs. So I think there's a lot more to be gleaned there on tariffs. I think the story has not been written. Both are trying, certainly former President Trump is trying to use it as leverage, but we'll dig into that. I think taxes, there's certainly differing points of view there. The regulatory environment, how they view cannabis legalization. So there's a lot to unpack there, and then you also need to factor in control of Congress, which we will prognosticate as best we can. I don't want to give anything away, but
Yeah. Can we talk about aluminum just for a second? Because maybe I probably am not like completely up to date on the aluminum situation, but the last I saw, like there was aluminum is a weird product. First of all, it like Goldman Sachs has piles of it. It's doled out like diamonds, like the old De Beers, collusive. It's a total scam. And of course, there's tariffs on aluminum, which is driving up the cost for brewers. That I think it's not strategic for the U.S. at all. What is the latest on aluminum, and what are you guys? What's the prognosis of getting any relief on that?
well, Harry, it's like pushing a boulder uphill on aluminum right now. And, part of the challenge is that the additional cost driver on top of tariffs is the Midwest premium, which nobody really can understand. It's set through a benchmarking process that S&P Global Platts controls, but it undoubtedly increased costs. And whether it's on metal that should be subject to a tariff or whether it's recycled metal that should not be subject to a tariff, you're paying an additional fee with the Midwest premium. So there are efforts in Congress, 2 or 3 pieces of separate legislation that would address this, whether through a regulatory enforcement mechanism or through exposing what's happening with the Midwest premium. But again, Congress is not in a position to pass something like this right now. And
Right.
so our efforts right now are educating members of Congress about this really unnecessary fee that's being placed on brewers and on consumers. And to your point, the fact that these tariffs are only exacerbating the situation, right? They're not, the ITC, the federal ITC, the International Trade Commission, came out with a report that said tariffs are not being borne by foreign countries. They're being paid for by American consumers. So it's incredibly frustrating, and it impacts everyone in the industry, right? Because they are having to pay more for this commodity, and it's a huge cost driver for the industry. So it continues to be an area of focus. We've tried to work with partners like the folks at the Beverage Association, the marine manufacturers, the folks that build boats. They use a ton of aluminum. The Flexible Packing Association to try to raise the visibility of this issue, and we're going to continue to do so. But it is a real challenge, and it is unfortunately one that is not going to go away anytime soon. I mean, the other sad reality is that there are so few aluminum manufacturers here in the United States, including some that are close to being shut down, mostly because of legacy costs. And so we are reliant on foreign sources, unfortunately.
Right. And who benefits from the Midwest premium? Somebody's making money on this. I want to know who they are.
We're still trying to figure that out. I'm not sure. Mary Jane Saunders has been working on this for decades, and I don't think she's clear as to who's getting that additional money.
It's got to be Goldman Sachs and Blackstone. Those are my guesses. But I'm just a conspiracy theorist over here.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, pot at the end. Never mind. Scratch that. I was about to make like a leprechaun analogy and it just didn't work. So anyway, what else to highlight
It was
about
a
this
good
year's
try,
show?
Jen. It's a
Thank
good try.
you.
You know what?
Hey,
Keep trying.
I'm gonna keep trying. I'm gonna keep trying. I need more sleep. And there's my husband's requisite crashing,
Yeah, every time.
crashing of the show. He always asks, "What time are you filming your pod?" And I always tell him, and he always walks in the middle of it. Anyway, cameo. He covers beverages too. What else can we highlight about this year's show? Because I know we're gonna have a big baton pass from Brendan to Gavin. What can you share about that?
Yeah, we're grateful for Brendan's leadership, and we will be passing the baton to Gavin Hattersley of Molson Coors, who will take over as our chair. You know, we've been working with Gavin and his team to really identify his vision for the BI over the next two years. And what's interesting, and probably a little known fact, is that Gavin, at the same time he's chair of the BI, will be chairing IARD, which is the International Association for Responsible Drinking, which is all of beverage alcohol, and they focus their work mostly in Geneva and the World Health Organization. And so making sure that our messaging and the work that we're doing here in the States is aligned with the work that's being done internationally is a huge focus for Gavin. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about that, but you know, Gavin is he's an exceptional leader and, you know, a visionary for the industry. And, we're really grateful to have him, chairing our voting board. So, you know, we've added a couple of meetings, to our schedule. The lawyers will be meeting in person, and we're opening that up to not only voting board, representatives, but all brewer representatives. And they're going to be talking, you know, some fairly heady issues within the industry, whether, you know, it's dietary guidelines to, you know, the CCRB and the work that it does to ensure responsible consumption and making sure that our marketing is appropriate. And so we're happy to have that. Obviously, our Brewers Council will meet, our Suppliers Council will meet. We've got a really awesome speaker for our general session, guy named Dmitry Alperovich, who's the founder of CrowdStrike, and he's got an amazing story to tell. He has since left the company, and so when CrowdStrike had their little hiccup with Microsoft and all of the plane terminals and all the boards and all of our flights were canceled, you know, he has a story to tell there. But he just recently wrote a book called Democracy on the Brink, and it focuses on how the U.S. can win in a global situation with China. He also dives deep into the Russia-Ukraine situation, and he's going to tie it all together and what it means for beer. And so he's just a fascinating person, an amazing speaker. So he's gonna be one of our keynotes. So really excited to have him join us as well.
That sounds like right up my alley. I ought to pick up his book and read it before I attend his session.
Or Harry, I don't want to spoil the surprise, but we might have a book for you there.
Oh, okay. Of course. Of course. Right. I don't want to waste my Amazon points, but I think we can probably confidently say that CrowdStrike, while they have had their issues, they're probably not the cause or the beneficiary of the Midwestern premium. So, but we don't know that for sure.
Well, I'll ask Dimitri when he's on stage.
Okay.
But no,
Yeah.
I don't think CrowdStrike is driving the Midwest premium.
No. And I want to quickly correct myself in real time, kind of like the presidential debates. When I said Blackstone, I of course meant Black Rock.
Black Rock.
Not Blackstone. So
And not Brooks Brothers or
right. Or you never know. Those fuckers at Brooks Brothers.
Or Brookstone. Are those guys still around?
Brookfield. God, there's so many.
Right? A good place to kill an hour at the mall. Yeah.
All these people could be involved.
Well, one more question from me. You're talking about tying it all together and geopolitics and politics and running races. Like, it feels to me like beer is running its own race right now, right? There's a referendum on beer, and are the American people going to choose beer or not? How do we combat this anti-alcohol alcohol sentiment without looking too defensive, right? Like, isn't that the question?
Yeah, Jen, that's a great analogy, and I think that from our perspective, beer is uniquely positioned to tackle the challenges that we're facing, whether it's with the consumer or along the lines of dietary guidelines. Beer has been woven into our nation's fabric. It has been around for centuries, and the reality is we are innovating. We are meeting the consumer where they are. You can see it with the investment in NA, and the growth of those products, low and no. And we're excited about the future. Now, I think we all recognize the headwinds that face all of beverage alcohol, but we believe that beer is uniquely positioned to address those head on and really come out the other end in a much stronger position. Now, again, there are other entrants into the market. There are disruptors like Delta 9 and these new products that are coming aboard. And we need to make sure that we need to make sure that our products can compete with those products on a level playing field. And when given the option, I think the consumers will ultimately decide that our products are superior. But we're not at that point right now. We're fighting with one hand or both hands tied behind our back because Congress created this enormous loophole, and now states are having to address it. And during the interim, there are entrepreneurs that have entered into the marketplace. And so it's something that we're going to have to address moving forward. But my goal for the BI is to have a credible affirmative position so that when those debates happen, we can enter those debates. We can be part of the conversation as opposed to what we are right now, or what we were doing previously, which was neutral on a lot of these issues, which just makes the industry seem feckless. And so, our voting board was clear that we need to have an affirmative position that we can stand behind, and we're working towards having that.
I mean, am I allowed to say it's a complete shit show talking about D9? I mean, the state, which is great for us as news people, because there's always something, even in August and September, there's something to write about because it is kind of fun in a way. I don't want to, my prediction, if it is studied and it is proved that you're not going to have gills growing out of your ears by drinking it, then it should be regulated like alcohol. It should have a 3-tier. There should be a chokehold for taxes in the middle tier. It should be highly regulated, 21 and above, all those things, driving, everything. But if not, then yeah. And the other thing I'd like to say is that I agree with you. Beer is situated to best withstand these assaults from the WHO and others because it is lower in alcohol in nature. It's a beverage of moderation. And number two, a lot of this is just being trumpeted by the New York Times, and their readers drink wine. Can we just say it? They don't drink any beer anyway. So we're safe on that front.
You said it. You said it. But the scary thing about it, I agree with your assessment, using your words. It's a shit show. And the challenge is, or the problem is right now, is that some of these products, these very dangerous products where you're getting 90 milligrams of D9 intoxicating hemp in liquid form, are available at gas stations and C-stores in states that have no regulation and are not paying attention. And who are buying these products? There's no age gating, there's no warning, there's no nothing. So how do you know even what dosage to get? I mean, it's, as a parent of a child who's a teenager, it's terrifying. That my 13-year-old could potentially go on a trip and buy a product that looks like an energy drink but has 90 milligrams of intoxicating hemp in it. I mean,
and who wants 90 milligrams? Is there anybody on the face of the earth that wants to sit down and just session drink a 90 milligram? I mean, 5 milligrams should be the standard. And then if you're it should be kind of like liquor, where 5 milligrams is like beer and wine, and then 10 milligrams or anything above 5 should be regulated more like spirits, But there should be a cap, just like spirits. You're not going to get over 100 proof. Anyway, I'm just going on a rant that nobody listens to me anyway, but that is reasonable to me for once.
Well,
Yeah.
and 90 milligrams is just what it says on the can. I mean, you really, who's verifying that it's 90
Right.
milligrams, 100 milligrams, 0 milligrams? So,
Jordan, you don't think that they have scientists in white coats testing it every time it
no,
goes out?
they have nothing on Anthony von Mandel. So,
Yeah, right.
It's Inspector Gadget back there doing the readings. But I don't see a world where this survives unless it is taken into the 3-tier system and alcohol regulations. But then, I mean, honestly, Brian, I don't see why beer suppliers would want this to exist at all, regardless of regulations, right? I mean, it's just more competition.
Some craft
That's-
brewers might want
That's
to.
Yeah.
true.
Craft brewers.
Jen, I would agree with that assessment. I think everyone within the industry is taking a side-eye look at it and whether or not there's a potential play. I think from our perspective, from the BI's perspective, the first thing we have to do is turn off the spigot and put some real enforcement and regulations in place. You can't do anything until you do that.
Yeah.
Same for cannabis. Until you figure that piece out, we're going to continue to have the problems that we're seeing across the country. So, I mean, just based upon this conversation, you guys can tell that folks are thinking about this. And you know, I've spoken to state associations, state guilds, state distributorship, you know, wholesale execs, and everyone's thinking about it. Everyone's looking at it. If you're in a state where it's legal, you're trying to figure out what the rules of the road are, and there's no guidance, and it's really frustrating, and it's a real problem. And so, you know, we thank Governor Newsom for his leadership, because the reality was the California state legislature had a bill before it that would have put real regulations in place. They couldn't get it done. They went out of session, and he said, I'm going to do it through executive order. And I think we're going to continue to see that, because it's a very strange situation where the cannabis folks are opposite the hemp folks. And so they're fighting, right? You've got distributors that are weighing in from both sides. You've now got suppliers coming in saying, we need to figure this out. We need to be the adult in the room and figure this out. And so, and then I just read an article here today in DC about the, you know, increase in lobbying expenses made by the hemp industry. I mean, they doubled their lobbying expenses in the last quarter, which is remarkable. So this is not an issue that's going away. It's only going to be heightened. There's going to be more emphasis on it. And we think we're an important voice in that discussion.
Yeah. Yeah, this hemp lobby, they are very proactive. We can say from having interacted with them, yeah, they're scrappy. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think the only thing that I would ask about is equivalency efforts, and if that's still just like a whack-a-mole, you know, going around the nation.
Yeah, Jordan, it is. You know, our friends in liquor have a never-ending quest to upend the tax laws, whether it's on the federal level or the state level, to try to gain more leverage. And we continue to be successful on the state level. You know, we'll talk a little bit about that at the annual meeting. On the federal level, we continue to look at tax breaks that the liquor industry already enjoys, many of which should be reformed or done away with. And certainly when we talk about Congress looking at the tax situation beginning in 2025 and all of the tax cuts that are likely to expire without some further action, you know, we see an opportunity to include some of these really odd tax provisions as something that should be reformed, like IRC 5010, where you get a tax credit for flavoring your liquors. So why should a manufacturer of cotton candy vodka get a tax break? It makes no sense. You know, rum cover over is another one where you would think that Congress would understand that instead of giving a tax break to large liquor companies that produce rum, that money should be accruing to the people of Puerto Rico or of the American Virgin Islands. So there are really simple, sort of thoughtful things that can be done to address those issues. But yeah, I fully expect that again in the 2025 legislative session, we're going to see an all-out assault to lower excise taxes for liquor products once again.
The whole RTD in a can equivalency debate, they've been hammering at this for a couple of years. And from my perspective, do they really want, and this is just me talking, but do they really want to open themselves up to just let's shine some sunlight on the rum cover over, which is, by the way, I've said it many times on this podcast, is the most ridiculous piece of legislation that Charlie Rangel defended for years, and I don't know who's defending it now, but somebody is. And then the flavoring thing was, I remember when that went through, that was Gary Glanis again at Diageo who really spearheaded that and got that through somehow. The beer guys were sleeping, I think. But yeah, I mean, that's just two examples of things that are Achilles heels, I think, to the liquor guys that I would think they'd want to protect rather than just, hey, let's shine light on liquor tax law. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, Harry, if you want to know, it was former Senator Bob Menendez who was defending rum cover over with, and he was found with, gold bullion in his closet. So he's no longer in Congress, but
he had cash in his freezer too, which I admire him for that, keeping his cash cold. But I mean, yeah, he took the reins from Rangel when he retired, and there's always somebody, right? That will
always somebody.
Yeah.
Hey, but yeah, I would agree. Look, I think what's fascinating is that, the second largest maker of canned cocktails is a brewer, right? And they're not the ones out there saying, lower the excise taxes for me. They understand that the base product is different. And since Prohibition, everyone has recognized that higher ABV products, base products, need to be taxed differently. So I agree with you. I think that there is, I hope, I don't think that this will be the case, but I hope that all of beverage alcohol can focus on the real challenges that we face, and that we can lay down our swords as it relates to trying to upend the tax code to try to benefit one segment over the other. Because if we can do that, we can protect craft beverage and we can better serve our members on dietary guidelines. If we're distracted by these one-off attempts to, lower excise tax for one segment over another, we're gonna take our eye off the ball. And so,
Yeah,
that's been my message to my compatriots and the other trade associations.
totally. I agree. Well, thank you so much for being on, Brian. We appreciate it. And, if you're amenable, we'd like to, have you on about twice a year and just to kind of get the update on what's going on over there at the BI.
Oh yeah, that would be my pleasure. And Harry and Jen, and Jordan, my dream came true today by being on this podcast. So I'm grateful to you.
Well, you can feel free to put it on your CV, put it on your LinkedIn profile. It really is a big accomplishment, and so congratulations on that. And well, we'll see you, or I'll see you at least at the BI meeting in New York. Looking very much forward to it, and maybe we can have a beer or at least wave to each other. You'll probably be busy actually.
Oh, we'll have a beer, and Harry, I look forward to hearing about your absentee ballot. Right, you're gonna.
All right, I'll let you know which one I voted for.
Yeah, do your civic duty.
All right, we'll see. I'd like to point out to our, at least those watching on YouTube, you'll notice that Spooky Doo is back making his debut. He's been off the air for like 2 or 3 years. Just to kind of pull back the curtain here, Spooky Doo did not make the move from the Pearl to my new house a couple of years ago. And I lost him, and it turns out he was just out partying. And as you can see, he's turned purple.
Orange and yellow.
Yeah, and orange and yellow. And Spooky Doo, you just keep your mouth shut. Keep your mouth shut.
Don't you be talking about what you be seeing there, Spooky Doo.
Boogie Doo, have you been benefiting from the aluminum Midwest
Midwest Brewing.
premium?
How about the rum cover over?
Oh, you know that gets my blood pressure up
Yeah.
every
Oh,
time.
I do. That's why when Brian mentioned it, I just started
Yeah.
smiling. I was like, music to Harry's ears,
Yeah.
that rum
Yeah.
cover
Here we
over.
go. That just sparks a rant. That was a great interview with Brian. That's the first time he's been on, and we'll have him on again. I thought he brought up a lot of good points. I wanted to talk about the issue of Beer Business Daily yesterday, where you guys covered what retailers are doing out there, and also you kind of explored what D9 distributor contracts are looking at. I thought that was a great issue, by the way. Both articles in that issue are exclusive, so if you haven't read it yet, go to beernet.com and check it out. But so talk about a little bit about what retailers are seeing out there.
Yeah, so we had our, always protected, but large unit sources, right? These are big retailers. Just taking the temperature of what's hot, what's not, what's coming up. And they were all different kinds of retailers. And it was some of, what's expected. Mick Ultra seems like it's doing pretty good. Bud Light, several mentioned, unprompted, especially on tap, not doing so hot, right? So that trend continues. Obviously, lots of talk about the RTDs of the world. I thought it was interesting. One of the retailers said, Buzzball's on fire. Sazerac wants to grow like 200%. I wasn't sure if that was very specific in reference to Buzzballs or just overall. But that's obviously, we know that Gallo and Sazerac are driving the train as fast as they can. Pricing was not popular with any other retailers in terms of, taking more price increases. We did have somebody write in and say, like, I don't get it. They sell it for so much more when we take a little price or when price increases are taken. And I'm like, well, yeah, because it cuts into their margin.
Right.
Obviously, they don't like that. But let's see what else. I mean, Banquet is still gaining traction despite, some of the larger premiums and premium lights having a hard time. We did hear that although Modelo and Corona, or especially Modelo, are doing well, obviously, that there was some signs of a little bit of deceleration from a couple of retailers. Not surprising. These are top brands, law of large numbers. I'm trying to remember what some of the other highlights were. Non-alc, several mentioned that was an increasing trend. Now, obviously on a small base, but one said that consumers are, quote, deselecting alcohol, which is incredibly depressing, right? So, I think it's interesting too that there are some people in the industry that are a little ambivalent about non-alc, even non-alc beer, because, it does bring about this conversation about, no alcohol or alcohol is not great for you. But I think it's a both and thing, right? Like we know that the majority of these things are consumed by people who consume alcohol and even in the same occasions. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad
I find it hard to believe that people are still riding on that train. I mean, if they're not going to drink non-alc beer, then they're out of your system. Then they're not drinking things you distribute or make.
right.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's crazy. Like,
Yeah.
yes, you want if people aren't drinking, you want them drinking non-alc beer. You get the margin. You get there's no downside. And
Right. Right.
I
Yeah.
will say that I had a beer with Bill Schufelt when I was in Columbus. By the way, shout out the Ohio Beer and Wine Distributors. Thanks for having me. Great show. Yeah, first of all, I want to say that Bill is a great salesman. We were up in this bar at the top of the hotel overlooking Columbus, and this was clearly a cocktail bar. And he asked for a non-alc beer, and they gave him what's that German non-alc that is
Oh,
Klaus
no,
Timer or something?
yeah, something like that, I
Yeah,
think.
that's all they had. And he was like, "Well, what about athletic?" And the bartender's like, "Well, I mean, we sell cocktails here."
Yeah.
And then finally, they got the manager over. The manager came over, and Bill pulled out the "I'm the founder" card, literally on his card. And the guy was like, "Oh shit," and it was like we have a celebrity in the house, and the I think that by the end of the conversation, Bill made a placement. So
Nice.
so
Nice.
if you're ever at the Hilton at the top of the bar in Columbus, Ohio, get yourself a cold athletic because they're going to have it next time.
ABC, always be closing that, Bill. Nice
Always
guy
be
too.
close it. Non-alc beer is a win for every single body. Any of you guys are still out there saying that, then you're still stuck in the 90s or the
Yeah.
early 2000s at the latest.
Yeah. I think
So,
some people do think it might just be a flash in the pan too, right? But as we've seen with these things, there usually are one or two winners that do stick around, right? Case in point, seltzer.
right.
So, and then, jumping off the non-alc springboard, I did ask about D9. Most of the retailers were like, we're not touching that until there's more, regulations in place, obviously. There was one, I would say, more like kind of hybrid forward thinking retailer that was like, oh no, it's here to stay and it's selling and it's increasing and this thing. So it's interesting. It is interesting too to see, and this will dovetail with the other article that was in the issue. It's interesting to see how different parts of the industry are breaking down along their alliances and what they want. Like, obviously, big brewers, at least craft brewers, are getting into it themselves, but big brewers, I would think, they want no part of D9. They would love to shut that down, even if it were completely, regulatory buttoned up. Why would they? That's just something for them to compete with, unless they want to acquire, which that seems like I don't know.
Well, I mean,
Um,
Jen, they had the same reaction to craft beer when craft beer was growing.
well,
They tried to kill it in its bed, in its crib,
smother it in the crib.
and then all of a sudden they said, all right, we're going to join them. And I could see a world where that happens. Now it's
Yeah,
probably 5 years out, but if it
Right.
ever
yeah.
gets any traction, which if they can get a regulatory framework around it, it will get traction. I mean, I've been to Total Wine. They allocate a ton of space for it in the cold box, which means that it's selling.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there aren't really brewers anymore, AB, like Brian said, is a gigantic canned cocktail player now. Molson Coors is the same. They're in energy. They're in anything that you can put liquid in a can in, I think they want to be a part of. And so if it can get buttoned up, I think they'll want to be in it. I mean, they've already tried to get into cannabis and it all of them kind of failed miserably, but this is something that actually has legs and opportunity if it can get regulated, because it can actually go into retail. So I think they would want to participate there.
Yeah. The D9 contract, it sounds like it's kind of like the distributors are trying to make it or normalize making it like a beer contract.
Right.
And
Yeah, because the alternative is it's like a non-alc and you get no fair
nothing.
market value, right? And I
Yeah.
asked Tilray directly, well, what does your contract look like, for the D9 beverages, which they announced the portfolio this week. And of course they didn't tell, they were like, oh, we're looking at fair market value, but they did say it is going to be more like non-alc contracts. So then I went to different distributors who I know already distribute these types of things. None of them, wanted to go on record, except for Hohenstein's, good old Hohenstein's in
Yeah.
Minnesota, the epicenter of D9. And Chris Freem there said, we have this basic language that basically talks about kind of determining the value in the future. Like if we can't agree on this, then we get basically like an expert or I guess like an arbitrator to determine it. But we did have somebody write in and say, well, that's only as good as the contract itself. So caveats there. We had another distributor, much larger distributor in another state that's an AB wholesaler that said, no, we put 4X in our contracts, right? And they did say like, some balked at that, but ultimately the majority of them signed it. And I think that's what beer wholesalers around the country are trying to figure out together now. I know that on a similar note, some wholesalers have told us that they are working in the state houses right now to introduce legislation state by state. There are some wholesalers that are not on board here. Some big wholesalers that aren't necessarily on board.
So let me just peel back the curtain on that a little bit. Here, of course, there's exceptions. Let me just make some blanket statements. Right now, I would say the AB wholesalers are the ones that are jumping on this for obvious reasons. And on the other side, you have Reyes, who is definitely not on board with D9, which is not surprising. Reyes has always been a very conservative organization. And if Reyes is not on board, that makes it doubly difficult for other Molson Coors wholesalers around them to get contracts to get the product, because obviously you want seamless distribution territories in wherever state you're going into. So if you put those two together, this is an AB wholesaler situation for a lot of the country.
Yeah.
And as long as Reyes stays out of this game, and not only stays out of it, but they're actively telling other distributors not to touch it, I think that's how it's playing out so far.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I mean, I have seen objections to the fact that, hey, what happens if we distributors use our muscle in the state's houses to help get this passed through on the state level, and maybe even at the federal level, and I'll get to federal level in a second. What happens if all of a sudden eventually cannabis is federally legal, and then we're okay with this, but not that, and we have to compete against that, and that would be a huge loss for them, they're saying, and I don't disagree with them. I mean, I'm still amazed by how quickly this all has just come up, because we accidentally legalized something that we did not realize we were legalizing. I mean, that's what happened, right? And now we're dealing with the ramifications, and it'll be fascinating to see if this really does get encoded into alcohol regulation in the 3-tier system, and how big that business ultimately gets. I mean, well, the
All
other
right.
thing I would say, just one more thing, we haven't published this yet, but yesterday, good old Senator Ron Wyden, who you guys remember for helping to toe the line and fight the fight with Kaboomtra, with the BA forever, he introduced the Cannabinoid Safety and Regulation Act. So that's a federal bill, national in scope, right? And it basically seeks to put hemp-derived THC basically on par with Bev-Alc in terms of how it's regulated, age gating 21 plus, bringing the FDA and the TTB in to help with oversight and that sort of thing. So I'll just read from the bill. It basically spells out, like, not later than 60 days after the date of enactment of the act, Secretary of Agriculture, Commissioner of Food and Drugs, the Attorney General, the Director of Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau, acting jointly, shall publish a report that includes recommendations for a federal regulatory framework for these kinds of beverages that contain, what the applicable word that I can't pronounce, modeled on the federal regulatory framework for alcohol, and which delineates responsibilities among the Department of Agriculture, the Food and Drug Administration, the Department of Justice, TTB, for labeling, taxation, manufacturing, and adulteration standards, right? So basically modeling it exactly after alcohol.
And does he have like decent co-sponsors, or is this kind of a pissing in the wind type of situation?
There was another Democrat co-sponsor, so it didn't seem like terribly bipartisan. I have heard they don't expect it to get a ton of traction right now, but just like with Kaboomtra, that was like a 10-year fight, right? I forget how long that
What is
fight was.
Kaboomtra?
The beverage modernization.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm getting old, folks. I'm not keeping up with the latest terminology here.
It's
So,
easier to say Kaboomtra. Sorry.
yeah, well, no cap.
Yeah.
Skizzy toilet. Skizzy on neighborhood.
Yeah.
Jordan, are you standing on business still?
I am. I don't know about skizzy on toilet though.
Well, you got to get with it.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure I saw Skizzy on toilet at your house, Harry.
Well,
Hey, enough about my toilet situation. I can't afford to have housekeepers up here every week. All right. So, all right, kids. Well, that was a great issue. Congratulations on that. We'll see you folks at the MBWA next week, starting on Sunday. And when is our little drinkers deal with 3-tier?
Yep, Monday at 5 to 6:30 in the lobby bar. Be there for the to have a drink on the Golden Amex.
It's platinum, honey.
Oh,
Platinum.
sorry.
Yeah. We are titanium, bulletproof. All right, guys. Well, we'll see you next week, and we'll see you in San Diego, and we'll be back at you. Take care.
awesome.
All right. Good job. Good job, Jordan.